Okay, welcome. My name is Rainer Heufers. I work with the Center for Indonesian Policy Studies. Most of you here I know, so it's a pleasure to have you here in this discussion. I'm trying to give you a short input so that we have time for discussion later. I hope I keep my word and not blabber on for too long. Right, so our topic is forest ownership and management in Indonesia, reducing deforestation by strengthening communal property rights. Now, let me just start by saying there is a real tragedy happening in this country, and I mean it, the tragedy of deforestation. 1 million hectares, potentially, nobody knows the exact numbers, but it could be up to 1 million hectares per year that are lost. That in itself is, I believe, indeed a tragedy. Just to put it into perspective, roughly 7 times New York City metropolitan area. So it's a huge area per year that is being lost. And it needs to be addressed somehow. And the question is, of course, how? But before we look at that, let's talk about why is this happening? What are the reasons for this huge amount of deforestation? Now, there are a couple of reasons that everybody is discussing. There's either logging for timber, palm oil plantations, mining, human settlements, agriculture. And if you look at the statistics, roughly this big, large chunk here, 64% is due to agriculture. This is not Indonesia, this is the whole world of rainforests in Latin America as well as here, etc. But the biggest reason is always agriculture, followed by logging industry, then some fuel wood and cattle ranches, etc. But the largest share always goes to agriculture. And so we need to keep that in mind. Now, let's look again further at those reasons for deforestation. Now, these are they really the only reasons? Is that all there is? And of course, as classical liberals, we try to see what is not so easily to be seen. And that's why what is seen is actually logging for timber and all the other reasons, but there are others. And most importantly, I think, they are underlying all those over there. You have protectionism that contribute to deforestation. You have blocked migration both ways. It's hard to come to Indonesia and settle in Indonesia. It's also not easy for an Indonesian to settle abroad, which limits technological exchange and know-how transfer and everything. Nationalism to a certain extent, some technological backwardness. All of this is interdependent, of course. And last but not least, also the situation of property rights. Now, this fills an entire conference, so I'm not going to talk about all these things. I will focus mostly on property rights, but I also want to talk a little bit about protectionism, because, and here are some Indonesian colleagues, I do believe this opens areas where we need to do more study, more research, and give the government more feedback on what protectionism does to the forests in Indonesia. So a word on this. To tell you about it, I give you a story. The story of a district in the heart of the island of Java. You see here Jakarta. It's about the middle of the island of Jakarta, central Java. The district of Wonosobo has about 700,000 people in there. It's about 1,000 square kilometers. So a normal district out of 400 districts and 100 cities in this country. Well, in Indonesia, almost everything is about volcanoes. So the landscape basically is also pretty much volcanic landscape, agriculture in the valleys, forests up in the mountains, mostly. So that is Wonosobo, and they are affected by protectionism quite badly. How's that? Well, I don't often show official United States documents to prove the point of protectionism, because the United States is as guilty as anybody else. But they actually accuse Indonesia's import licensing regimes and related prohibitions and restrictions quite badly. And they're right. There are lots and lots of restrictions and limitations when it comes to fruit, apples, etc., and also potatoes. So this is a story about potatoes in Wonosobo. Indonesians know all about Wonosobo, thinking about potatoes. This goes together, belongs together somehow. Well, there's actually a problem with this, because if you look at the numbers here, and I did a rough comparison only, The potato prices in Indonesia here in comparison to per capita income are extremely high. You pay in Indonesia about 97 US cents per kilo compared to income levels, whereas, and I am from Germany and we consume a lot of potatoes, we only pay in proportion in comparison to our salaries and income, we only pay 30 cents per kilo. So potatoes are extremely expensive here in this country. Philippines is even worse than Vietnam, but let's not look at those cases. The price is artificially high. If you go to Alibaba.com, you can buy a metric ton of potatoes for very little money. Just check now, you see several offers, 5 metric tons, 10 metric tons, for about $200 US dollars per metric ton. But the consumers here in Indonesia pay about 97 cents US dollars per kilo. It's very high. What's the normal consequence, the logical consequence for the farmers? Let's grow potatoes. The prices are high, that makes sense, I grow potatoes. And that's the problem of Wonosobo, with an artificially high price, because there is no free trade. The farmers in Wonosobo grow potatoes. All slopes look like this, and it's all potatoes. Now, unfortunately, it's a bit too bright to see it too clear, but you see all the fields here. This is all potatoes, and some farmers have even started with vertical farming and not anymore the horizontal farming. Natural result of this, terrible landslides. You can make a case that protectionism leads to the death of people because the potato farms here really cause landslides, flooding. It's a terrible situation for the people there, but they keep growing potatoes. Here you see, this is a photo from the district government, and they were shocked about this because a landslide just happened. Some villagers are trying to help those victims that are caught in the landslide, and some potato farmers just carry their potatoes across the landslide to continue their business. Indonesia is very proud of helping each other. It's kind of like a local concept of we have to help each other in the village. Everybody's proud of this, and this goes contrary to all that philosophy. And finally, this is the situation also in Wonosobo. Every potato farmer needs water. You don't work together anymore to build one water source, one pipe. Every farmer himself, herself, builds a little individual plastic pipe to go to the next lake to extract the water. No more cooperation. Everybody is in fighting for themselves. So this has led to, of course, deforestation, because everybody wants to grow more potatoes. The competition is fierce. Everybody is afraid that the government restrictions will end and the price will come down. So the farmers try to get as much profit as fast as possible, and they take down the forest. So I wanted to talk to you about this because the new government has a new policy which they called food self-sufficiency. Within a few years, they want to be able to live off, Indonesians want to live off their own rice, their own potatoes, their own agricultural crop. And the first local governments already proudly announce that they have cleared so many hectares for more rice, they have cleared so many hectares for more potatoes, for more, I don't know what. Clear deforestation happening because of this policy. We need to do work to tell the government what the consequences are, the unseen consequences at the moment. So much about protectionism. Now I come to actually property rights that were in the title of the presentation here. Quickly, in a nutshell, the situation in Indonesia is that forests are classified as either conservation forests, high biodiversity, need to be protected to save nature. Protection forests, that means these are the forests that actually grow close to human habitat and prevent landslides and floods and so on. So they are protecting human habitat. And finally, production forests, they can be cut down entirely, they can regrow. These are basically plantations. This is used for timber and other purposes. This is the classification. They are all under the control of the central government. By the constitution, forests and forest land belongs to natural resources, supposed to be under state control. And the government issued a moratorium on new logging concessions a couple of years ago. Well, I just told you that we're losing 1 million hectares per year, so obviously the moratorium doesn't really work. Surprise to this group here. What is the problem? The central government controls, but the actual responsibility for managing it is on different government levels. And these are competing levels. Could be either local, municipal, district government, it can be provincial government, it can be central government. It's quite unclear, and there are a lot of frictions between the government levels, and that means, of course, anybody who wants to go into the state forests just take out what they can get. And to make things worse, when it comes to logging, either there are concessions to, I say it bluntly in this group, some cronies, and if not, if it's managed directly by the government, then through a state-owned company called Perhutani. So this is rough, in a nutshell, the situation here in Indonesia. Now, what we did in our Center for Indonesian Policy Studies, we prepared a policy paper on this, and some of you have already signed up on our, we have a little table up there. So if you want a copy of this, just give us your email address. To save the forest, we didn't print them. You get a soft copy. And what we do is we collect a couple of examples from other countries. For example, in Nepal, there's a flourishing communal forestry scene in Nepal. About 1/3 of the population of Nepal is involved in communal forestry, with a lot of success. What has been deforested before has now been reforested. We just picked those 4 because there are many other countries. Some of you probably have been to Georgia, visited Pata Sheshilidze and the New Economic School. If you look at the hills around Tbilisi, they're all now green. If you went through the days of the Soviet Union, there was no tree. It's interesting, if you go to the museum, you look at the old pictures, great, now green. Why? Guess what? Property rights. Nepal, the local communities are organized in cooperatives, if you want, local units that manage themselves, and they are able to actually gain the benefit from managing their forests. They are taking out the profit, they are investing, they are clear, there's research, and we have the numbers in there, how much more income they generate through their own forests, protecting the forests, etc. So the local communities, they benefit from this. In Niger, in Africa, for those of you who are a little older, in school we were always told there's a problem of desertification. Desertification means the Sahara spreads further and further south, and lots of people lose their habitat, and it's really terrible. That was one of the key things I learned in school, desertification. Well, over there, in that country, which is right in that area, when they changed the system and allowed people to own, they had now 200 million more trees, and the livelihood went up a lot. We have some more numbers in the paper. And what they just did was to say, originally, when you had the desertification, nobody was allowed to cut down a tree. All trees were protected, and protection was by the government. So the forestry ministry was like a police. They made sure you take down no tree because there is desertification. Guess what? It didn't work. That's why you had desertification. The policing kind of thing just doesn't work. So instead, now they allowed people to use the trees, use the fruits of the trees. Some branches for firewood you can take. Some of the fruits and everything you can take from the trees is okay. This is called usufructuary rights. It's limited property rights. You can own, you can benefit, you cannot transfer. That means you are not able to sell them, buy them. It's a limited property right, had a huge success in Niger. And other countries have learned from that example already. Now, we also look at Malaysia. Oh, and by the way, of course, we have at least 2 Nepalese here. So you want to learn more about the experience in Nepal? We have the experts right here. We don't have anybody from Niger, if I'm not mistaken, but we have Amin from Malaysia. He's actually an expert on what I'm going to talk about now, the Mount Kinabalu experience, which is the highest mountain in Malaysia, 4,000 meters high, and there's a conservation forest around it. And what they did over there, they gave a private company the right to manage the tourism facilities on that, within this conservation forest. Now, you read a lot of papers that criticize the experience and say this money was never generated for conservation purposes. And I think here the assumption is wrong. Tourism, ecotourism in conservation forests is not supposed to finance conservation. I think what they do is they generate business opportunities and income opportunities for the local people. And then those local people stop poaching, illegal logging, etc. So they have other sources of revenue. That we have seen in many other countries as well. And that worked in Malaysia. The Mount Kinabalu forest is still regarded by UNESCO, it's a World Heritage Site, as in pristine condition conservation forest. And many of the Indonesian conservation forests are not anymore in that condition because you have lots of poaching and illegal logging activities. So ecotourism here had worked. And even in Indonesia, there are a couple of community forests that have generated income for the local communities. They're allowed to own the trees. I mean, the problem is, of course, still state ownership of the land, but at least they have ownership of their own plantations, which give them a certain investment horizon, which means they can take trees, for example, for their old age provisions, because they take time to grow, and then after 20, 30 years, they get the highest price for this. And they also get sustainable logging certificates on this and so on. So this shows in all those 4 examples how property rights reforms, maybe not 100%, maybe sometimes limited, already have enormous effects on the preservation of forests and trees in the country. Now, here again, and then we came up with a couple of reform suggestions in our paper here. We have these 3 different forests, right? So conservation forests, protection forests, and production forests in Indonesia. So for conservation forests, allow for limited commercial use, ecotourism, etc. That can all give local people income opportunities, business opportunities. But not like in the case of Malaysia. You will fully agree with me, I'm quite sure. Because when the concession was given to the tourism operator in Malaysia, by now, 20 years ago, it was done without a proper tender process. It was given to one company that had particularly good relations with somebody in the government. And so it wasn't run so well. So it has to be a proper process. And of course, if possible, there should also be competition within the conservation forest, not just one monopoly handed to somebody. In the protection forests, communal forestry, I do believe, would be very helpful, so that the communities can basically maintain the forests that they need for their own survival. And when it comes to production forests, we have a very clear statement: just privatize the whole thing. Production forests should not serve the purpose of the central government to generate revenues. They should either be used by private companies or also by local community companies that want to use it for their villages, etc. Now, I come back to the case of Wonosobo briefly before I end. So again, Wonosobo here, now you see it in a bit more perspective, and I included Bali now so that you can see how far it is from where you are right now. You're in the heart of Bali, here somewhere. Here's Wonosobo, here's Jakarta, so halfway between. And here, when we were there, we went with our team to research the situation in Wonosobo. They showed us a letter by that village within the Wonosobo district. And the villagers were up in arms because they had learned that that state-owned company, Perum Perhutani, is about to take down the forest around the village. But by now, the villagers had learned that deforestation leads to floods and landslides. So now they are alarmed and they're saying, what happens to us when you take, because this company in Jakarta intends to take down our local forest. So a clear example of how people are completely disempowered and just ask for the right to protect their own forest. So they fear because they don't know how much forest will be taken down by the state-owned company. Is it the entire forest? They are entitled to that because this is regarded as a production forest. They can take down 100% if they want. Or is it just a bit? They were not informed, so they filed a petition with the district government, which says, we are not in charge. there's nothing we can do because we have different levels of government in charge of different things, and there they say we can't do anything. We can send that to the state-owned company, but we have nothing to do with this. So this caused grievances, demonstrations, and very unpleasant situation over there. So roughly, I think, if I'm not mistaken, I'm done, but I won't go without repeating that we are crowdfunding for our education project. So we are trying to raise funds to implement what James Tooley did in many countries. We also want to do the same thing here in Indonesia. So please visit our website if you're able to support us. Even a small amount takes us a long way. Thank you very much. Now we have time for questions. Shall I moderate?
There's a lot of problems there, nationalism and so on and so forth. But I think one of the root of the problem is these wrong things that happen is the lack of education in the media. I mean, if you see one of the very popular economic discussion in Metro TV, economic challenges, these old people some of them call themselves economists, but they are potato head. You know, literally and...
Nothing against potatoes.
No, literally and metaphorically. So, and one of the economists is now heading the committee to elect the new chairman of the KPK, you know, Reduction Commission. And then we make one of our blog and we call it Challenging Economic Challenges. We publish around 5 writings, and it seems like they are changing their format now, but still, they still invited these potato head people. Now, you are in CIPAs. Do you have any program to infiltrate these media so more reasonable discussion can be going on? That's the first. And then the second, it seems like your end there is a communal forest. And still it's communal, and you still have to suspect if it's communal. Do you think there is a hand for, totally freer property right in Indonesia? Do you think it's reasonable end? Thank you, sir.
I think it's reasonable, but what we are trying to do is we're trying to suggest solutions that politicians find implementable. So we could go for the first best solution, or you need to come up with solutions that you do believe can actually be understood. So I'm with you here, but I do believe the communal thing, since especially has been tried already in Indonesia, it'll make make governments much more at ease to actually try it out, which would already take us a long way. That's why we stop at communal forestry, unless in production forests where we have a clear case of just privatize the whole thing. If we had an infiltration guerrilla tactic, I wouldn't share it with you right here in the microphone. But what we do is we have good contacts to parliamentarians and members of government. So we are actually going on one-on-one visits, and we speak to these people. We give them the papers. We are trying to tell them that there are other solutions. So we do this, and we will also have our press releases and everything, and talk to the journalists. We will make a strategy to reach out to the media, because you're right. A lot of this has also to do with lack of skills. People just think we have deforestation because of evil private logging companies playing hand in hand with the government. That's the general assumption.
And if we import from outside, it seems like the world will end tomorrow.
Yes, correctly. Right.
I have 3 things to say. I mean, I've noticed throughout this conference that a lot of the organizations never have a payment mechanism to accept donations through Bitcoin. I know that most of us do not understand it, but that's okay. You will find somebody who understands it, and that definitely will cut down on the transmission costs. I mean, you said you would accept even a small amount. That is possible through Bitcoin, so I would encourage you as well as the others to think about it. That's one. The second one is about the Usu factory rights you were talking about in Niger. Yes, that is true. I grew up in northern Nigeria, which is just south of Niger. And I remember going out with my classmates who are native Nigerians, and we would go to the local forest. And the trees, you're not supposed to do any damage, but you could take as many fruits as you wanted. So the tragedy of the commons did not happen as often there. And then the third is my response to criticism about communal ownership. I believe the fear is that the tragedy of the commons will happen there, but not if you see it as a closely held private company, where a community is like the shareholders of that particular forest, and then I suppose it goes back into the private ownership thing. And if you can sell it in, as philosophically at least as a small shareholding, but you can use the right words, the Kumbaya words or the Ubuntu words that are needed to win hearts and minds. But I think that is one way you could go about doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it does have household shareholdership. It's absolutely what it is. But communal forestry will speak so nicely to the audience that we have in Indonesia. And Bitcoin definitely on our mind.
Excuse me, I am Kimi from Youth Program Making Indonesia. I want to ask about how to solve soil degradation around of potato farm in Dieng Wonosobo by policy perspective after degradation now. Because as long as our property right policy, I think not effective in Indonesia. However, we need repair policy, not only anticipation, deforestation, and conservation policy. In my research, I ever researched by environmental perspective to suggest Wonosobo farmer to change community, but they was disagree because no one is community more benefit than potato and difficult for farmer to study benefit, to study about the other strategy to plan the other commodity. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. I mean, you just said exactly what is happening over there. The farmers insist on potatoes. The soil degrades. And I really know the local government there really well over many years. They really try to make a difference, and I trust them. They're very actually good people there. And they go and they tell the farmers again and again, grow something else. We need deeper roots so that the soil gets actually firm. We need actual plants that regenerate the soil. And they just wouldn't do it. They just wouldn't do it. They're very, in a way, even militant to hold on to the potatoes, and the local government can't get through. That's why I started not with property rights. That's why I started with protectionism, because here protectionism stops the whole thing, and we can't get any further unless you take away the last bit of farmers' rights and dictate what they grow. That has been done before, and this doesn't have good results either.
Forgive me, I didn't really get it why the potatoes are so expensive in Wonosobo. And then you mentioned something about American protectionism, and I didn't put those two together, so could you repeat that, please?
Yeah, sorry.
I've driven through Wonosobo a number of times, thank you. Next time I'm going to stop and have a look around. Very fascinating.
Thank you. I just quoted the US because they had this nice statement, the Trade Representative Office had this nice statement criticizing Indonesia for blocking American potato exports to Indonesia. So, Indonesia limits its potato imports, and that drives the price up. It's the same with rice and other products here. The prices are, sugar in particular. More and more people consume now wheat products with sugar and so on, and the prices are all artificially high for the sake of a couple of potato farmers, a couple of sugar farmers, and all the consumers, 250 million by now, pay the price.
So Indonesia blocks the potatoes into...
That's right. That's right. I just said I don't want to take America as the role model here, because America itself has a lot of protectionist measures as well.
Any other questions?
Just to follow up on that, so who's behind the protectionist policies in Indonesia? Because it seems like the farmers would be the ones who are benefiting from the scheme, but don't they also destroy their own community in this way? So I'm a little confused. Why would this protectionist policy persist?
Yeah, thanks. Wow, that's a huge question. Why protectionism? You have a lot of factors here. Of course, you have the vested interests that would go and lobby.
Who's the vested interest?
There are certain, for example, especially in the farmers' side, there is a strong political force here, as a political party, as a group, as a presidential candidate, who benefits from being portrayed as I protect the farmers. He is the head of the Farmers Association, not necessarily many farmers in it, but in the media it is portrayed as this man protects the fishermen, this man protects the farmers. So politics plays a role. Patriarchal society plays a role. The president is the father of the nation, needs to take care of the children, the population. So there's a lot that we need to protect our people. There's also something of what I call an island mentality. Indonesia has lots of islands, so there's a certain inward orientation. We need to make sure we are safe. Everybody else is far away, across the seas. There are many factors involved, but the general feeling is we want to live and sustain ourselves here on the island. A lot of people disagree, but the mainstream, I guess, is still like that.
Other questions? If not, let's thank Rainer again.
Well, thank you.